On the outside, looking inside. Overview. The Empire is one of the 6 great powers who wield influence over the known world. 2 of these other nations, the Commonwealth and the Sumer Republic, are allied to the Empire via the Liberty Pact. 2 others, the Asavean Archipelago and the Principalities of Yarm, are slaving nations, targeted with sanctions by the Pact members. The last nation, the Sarkovan Delves, neither uses slaves nor upholds the Liberty Pact, cherishing the freedom to trade where it will. There are countless smaller nations in the known world, but those that neighbour the Empire are of particular importance to Imperial citizens. Faradon, Axos, the Iron Confederacy, Ottokov, and the Broken Shore are all home to nations whose proximity grants them an unexpected level of influence over the much larger empire that they surround. Each nation has their own agenda, and the waters of international diplomacy can be choppy indeed. Imperial Consul. The Imperial Consulate has been completed in Tasato. The Senate could amend the title of the Imperial Fleet Master to remove their representative to the Grendel status. The Imperial Consul is Fal of the Imperial Orcs. The Imperial Senate gave orders for the construction of an Imperial Consulate in Tasato. Work has already been completed. It mostly involved repairing and renovating an existing property, expansion of a private dock, and the conversion of some bedrooms into offices for the consulate staff. Now that it is finished, the Imperial Consul not only has a fine new residence, but also a much expanded staff who can provide briefings. It has also reinforced the prestige of the Imperial Consul in the eyes of other foreign nations, meaning that visitors to the Empire are eager to gain their approval, providing a series of small ministries to the Consul. Finally, the existence of a consulate cements the Consul's prestige and status in the Empire. As such, all those people who regularly discount the Imperial Consul will begin to take the title seriously, dealing with them just as a foreign nation would deal with an ambassador. This is most relevant to the Grendel, who previously had refused to recognize the Imperial Consul and insisted on dealing with the Imperial Fleet Master. For the moment, the Imperial Fleet Master has the legal power of representative to the Grendel. With the completion of the consulate, if the Senate was to remove that power, then the Grendel would have no choice but to deal with the Imperial Consul just like any other foreign nation with whom no ambassador exists. Liberty Pact. A meeting of the Liberty Pact signatories is due to take place at Anvil during the spring equinox. Delegates from Axos, Sumer, and the Commonwealth are expected to attend. The meeting is expected to take place at 1600. The Commonwealth will chair. The Liberty Pact unites 4 nations in an economic, diplomatic, and trading pact dedicated to ending the practice of slavery in the known world. Delegates from each of the 3 other signatory nations are expected to arrive in Anvil for a meeting over the spring equinox. The imperial delegate will be Esker Crowspeaker, the current voice of liberty. The Grand Elarchs of Axos are sending Neoptolemus Lerophon of Kaban. General Lothar von Stahlking will represent the Commonwealth, and the Sumer Republic delegate will be Ozomati. Although the ambassadors to Axos, to the Commonwealth, and to Sumer may know more about the delegates, it's important to realize that the delegates are here for the Liberty Pact meeting. If they have any business with the ambassadors, they will be dealing with that separately. The representatives are not bringing large staffs of aides with them, and it is unlikely that they will be interested in having a large number of imperial citizens present for what is, after all, a gathering of delegates, not diplomats. As this is the first formal council since the actual signing of the Liberty Pact, the meeting is likely to involve at least some discussion of how future gatherings should be handled. It's not entirely clear where the meeting will be taking place, given the Senate is in use for an actual Senate session. Each of the delegates has raised the query of where they are to meet the voice of liberty. They will be able to pass a message back to the representatives via the civil service. Sumer. The Sumer Republic are signatories to the Liberty Pact. They have embargoed trade with slaving nations. The Sumer Republic still has possession of the imperial crown. The current ambassador to the Sumer Republic is Accolon of Felix Watch in Highguard. Broadly speaking, relations between the Sumer Republic and the Empire remain civil, but are also complicated by their shared religion. The Sumer still possess the imperial crown, and there are still significant divisions between the two synods. On the other hand, both nations are signatories of the Liberty Pact. Diplomatic relations are still there, which is an arguably better state of affairs than has existed at some points in the last few years. The House of Prosperity continues to support the Zemres Seminary, and imperial pilgrims are welcome in the Sumer holy city of Timoj, so things could be a great deal worse. Sumer Symposium. The Sumer Symposium delegation has reached the Empire. Unfortunately, almost all the members of the delegation have been struck down with food poisoning. Only one of the Sumer cardinals has made it to Anvil, Cossati, Cardinal of Prosperity, who has broken his leg. There will be an opportunity to meet Cossati on Saturday at 1900. The Sumer Synod, with a certain amount of pomp and ceremony, have dispatched their delegation to the Empire to speak with the cardinals of the Empire about the future of the way. They arrived in Crown's Quay in good time and began the journey to Anvil. Unfortunately, in circumstances that are still being investigated, while resting in Casca's Fall, the entire delegation was struck down with virulent food poisoning. The entire delegation, apart from one cardinal, the effusive Cossati, Cardinal of Prosperity, who apparently managed to avoid the malady that has struck down his fellows due to the fact that he does not eat meat, rather than call off the meeting again, Cossati and his staff made the trip to Anvil with an escort of high-born pilgrims and a Navarre striding. Unfortunately, the morning before the summit, Cossati managed to somehow fall down the stairs at the inn where he was staying and has broken one of his legs. These unlikely incidents do not appear to be the result of foul play so much as outrageous misfortune. But Cossati is not ruling out the possibility of a subtle curse, perhaps using autumn magic. There are factions, both mortal and otherwise, who would benefit greatly if the Sumer and Imperial Synods remained at odds with each other. As such, he is determined to meet with the delegates chosen to represent the Empire by the Imperial Cardinals: Vivian de Coeur de Feu, Hoel Summercrow, Clarice Novarian, Astrid Fjellrevening Rezia di Tassato, and Severin Tehard von Holberg. In the unlikely event that this is anything other than just misfortune, he wants to make sure that their schemes come to naught. Thus he has invited them to come meet him in the little walled park behind the inn where he is staying. He will do his best to represent the Sumer Synod. After all, any proposals arising from such a meeting will need to be approved, so they shouldn't actually require all 4 Sumer cardinals. A representative will be at the main gate at the top of the road from the Senate at 1900 on Saturday evening to collect the appointed delegates to convey them to Cossati's location. Out of character note: the encounter will take place in the woods on the other side of the hedge from the monster tent, meaning there will be a bit of travelling involved. There will be somebody to meet the delegates at the gate between the icy field and God. Seating is likely to be minimal, so it would be advisable to bring your own. There will be no documents to read and no smoke. Combat is possible, but extremely unlikely. After several disastrous delays, we have been forced to acknowledge that the challenge of presenting a quartet of Sumer cardinals and their entourages convincingly is simply too great. Rather than delay until we can, we've opted to move the plot forward in a format we can support. Cardinal Cossati is more than capable of representing the Sumer Synod at the meeting. Inspirations. The Sumer have provided a list of their inspirations to the Empire. In return, the Empire has provided a list of their own renowned exemplars and paragons. The Sumer have finally provided the Empire with a list of their paragons and exemplars. It was delivered a month before winter solstice in a Sumer ship escorted by 2 of the Republic's rare warships. It is, by all accounts, quite detailed, although parts of it have been provided in various Republic languages and needed quite a bit of translation. For want of anywhere else to store it, it has been housed at the Imperial Embassy to Sumer in Necropolis. Preliminary investigation indicates that it is pretty much as might have been expected. There are a small number of paragons and a very large number of exemplars listed. All 7 virtues are represented, and there are several crossovers. They acknowledge the paragons Tian, Kol, and Atun, for example. There are several inspirations that are similar but different. They recognize a paragon they call the Builder, who seems to be the same paragon that the Empire knows as the Sentinel, and an exemplar of courage they call Amar the Wanderer, who bears a striking resemblance to Adelmar the Lion. There are other well-known discrepancies as well. Zemres is considered a paragon by the Sumar, for example, rather than an exemplar. She is also one of the few actual historical humans known to history to receive that status. There are also some the Empire has never heard of that are very popular in Sumar, such as Clever Samia, exemplar of wisdom. There are several paragons that are known only among the Sumar, obviously, and some of these might prove contentious, especially the ones that some imperial scholars claim bear a striking resemblance to the idols the ancestors of the modern Sumar once worshipped. Venna the Great-Hearted, paragon of courage, shares many attributes and stories with Fire Lion. Depictions of the paragon of wisdom that the Sumar call Zoria sometimes show her accompanied by an ally known as Cloud Eagle, believed to be the name of some pre-Wei deity of the skies. The Sumar have provided neither context nor explanation for this. What is obvious from the list is that the Sumar recognize exemplars more commonly than the Empire does, and very rarely recognizes paragons. All of their inspirational figures are human. None of the paragons the Empire recognizes who were imperial citizens are recognized as such in Sumar, and no exemplar that the Empire has recognized in the last 75 years is recognized in Sumar. There is one odd exception. Asher of Felix's Watch was recognized as an exemplar of courage in summer 382, whereas in the Empire he failed to be recognized as a paragon in spring of that year. In turn, the civil service has provided a list of the Empire's own renowned paragons and renowned exemplars. Out of character note. Rather than create a list of dozens of paragons and exemplars that are recognized by the Sumar but not the Empire, after the spring equinox we will make a new page similar to those for the Surani Parathon and Axos religion. The new page will give more detail about the similarities and differences between the two groups of inspirations. Assavean Archipelago. The Imperial Senate and the Assavean Plenum have both applied sanctions to each other's trade. The ambassador to Assavea is Ashbourne Pact of the Imperial Orcs. Relations with the Assavean Assembly remain barely cordial. There is a strong anti-imperial faction in the plenum led by the Tarquinius, Coriolani, and Ilotari families, which seems to have the backing of all the major temples. While the faction has been in the minority the past few years, it is slowly gathering momentum. Representatives of the Heraclean and Ragnabi families, who support the Cava Bianca docks in Savos, are being pressured to cease trading with the Empire and sell their stocks of white granite to other nations. During the winter solstice, there was reportedly a gathering in Nemoria of nations not included in the Liberty Pact. As the spring equinox draws near, there is little publicly known about the result of the meeting, but there has been a notable decrease in Assavean traders visiting imperial ports, and a notable increase in ships visiting the ports of the Broken Shore and the Iron Confederacy of all places. The Temple of the Seven Virtues. The ruined Temple of the Seven Virtues in Nemoria is being repaired by a new benefactor. Imperial captains visiting Nemoria report that the Temple of the Seven Virtues now lies beneath scaffolds of sun-bleached wood. Slaves labour to repair the roof and restore a crumbling facade marred by riot, rain, and wind. The temple's mysterious new benefactor, a favoured child of the minor Trabosdor family, has become a figure of fun in the plenum due to their apparent support for the way. While the slaves work, the great doors of the temple, battered and broken by the mob, remain shuttered, and the grounds stand empty. Outside, the aggressive crowds of tattooed deists have thinned somewhat, although there is still vociferous preaching with a strong anti-imperial bent, and expressions of defiance of the temple and the priests of the nation that built it. Lacking an easy target, the anger directed at the way has festered and spread outward from the temple. Visitors to Assavea who openly display symbols of the way, or are suspected of being adherents, experience open hostility. Saga of the Exiles. 2 factions of Asavean exiles currently reside in the Empire. The Free Folk exiles are predominantly former slaves and servants who practice a form of the Way, and have moved to Caer Focon in Astolat. Some of the Free Folk are expected at Anvil around 1500 on Saturday afternoon, and will likely wish to greet the Lady of the Proffered Hand. The Maracosan exiles represent former nobles and their households from the defeated province of Maracosa and live in Trajados in the Brass Coast. A wealthy Maracosan exile is expected to visit Anvil around midday on Saturday, hopefully to speak with the Asavean ambassador. Half the Asavean refugees that established new homes for themselves in Trajados have moved to Caer Focon in Astolat to accept the hospitality of the Lady of the Proffered Hand. The Free Folk, former slaves and servants who seem to be devout followers of the Way, albeit in their own idiosyncratic fashion, are settling in easily alongside their Dornish neighbours. During their last visit to Anvil, there was some consternation around their veneration of La Paralanto de Morto, who they consider to be a paragon of some kind. By all accounts, there were also some unkind accusations of idolatry aimed at the Free Folk, and some of them were a little unhappy when they left. This summit, some of them have made the trip south to Anvil with the intention of speaking to imperial priests about their beliefs. They wish to understand the way the Empire sees their way, and why the Empire thinks that what they practice is wrong. They are expected to arrive around 3 o'clock on Saturday afternoon, and will presumably seek out their host, the Lady of the Proffered Hand. The other group of Asavean refugees, the Maracosans, are quite happy to stay in Trajados. If anything, they seem relieved that the Free Folk have gone. More room for them, and fewer arguments about religion, or so they believe. Last summit, the legate Glossia Herminia was supposed to visit Anvil to establish a formal relationship with the Empire, arrange for mutually beneficial trade, and secure formal recognition of the Maracosan settlement at Trajados. They did not arrive, apparently unavoidably delayed, but have again indicated their intention to visit the heart of the Empire. They are expected to arrive around midday on Saturday. They are expected to seek out the ambassador to Asavea of their first point of contact. Axos. The Axu are signatories of the Liberty Pact. The Grandilarchs of the citadels of Axos have publicly expressed their anger with the Empire as described in Tired of Sleeping. Several opportunities offered by the Axos have been concluded one way or another. The current ambassador to Axos is Tarquinius Ancarien of Urizen. The relationship between the Axu and the people of the Empire may best be described as tempestuous. One of the Empire's closest neighbours and fellow signatories to the Liberty Pact, they are nonetheless a proud and contentious people. The recent decision by the Empire to interfere in the affairs of the citadels, the removal of the Tamazi, has left some Axu wondering if they might have made a mistake in aligning themselves with the Liberty Pact. Still, they are sending a delegate to the council at Anvil this season, although there is some concern that there may be a subtle insult in their decision to send a member of the broken citadel of the tunnels of Kaban to represent them. After the winter solstice, there was a flurry of activity related to some previous opportunities the Axu had made available to the Empire, and perhaps just in time. It's likely that if the work on these projects had not been completed before the Grandilarch's Council to condemn the Temazi business, the offers would have been withdrawn. For the moment, though there is some unhappiness amongst the Axu, they are sticking to their agreements. This means that the controversial, in Axos, not the Empire, Elosian docks have been completed on the Redoubt coast, and the Senate has built a Skoran trade enclave in the citadel of Cantor itself. Both have imperial titles associated, which are due to be appointed during the spring equinox. It remains to be seen whether the current unhappiness among the Axu will affect them. Work has also been completed on the House of Spirits, a remote campus of the halls of Makop at the Axu Centre of Knowledge and Learning. Built in Mare Home in Cassinia, not far from the Silent Sentinel, it provides a home away from home for Axu students keen to study at the many centres of learning across the Empire. The first bursar of the House of Spirits is expected to be appointed during the spring equinox by those in Highguard who lead congregations. Mistress Isephinia and her fellow academics seem remarkably sanguine about the recent business with the Tamazi, and the fact that their liaison is effectively being appointed by pawns of the Creator. The first students are expected to arrive next month, looking to enroll at the University of Holberg, Diora University, the School of Epistemology, the Great Library of Hassinian, the many places of learning scattered across Urizen, and of course the prestigious Litharge in Necropolis. Other outstanding opportunities have been withdrawn, however. In particular, the opportunity to improve trade with the Chambers of Izzik has been withdrawn. This, at least, is probably not entirely due to the Tamazi business. The Aksu had made it clear that they were likely to look elsewhere if the offer was not taken up by the end of winter solstice, yet it is likely that the incident with the orcs ensured there will be no chance of receiving an extension. Out of character note. Any other opportunity relating to Axos that is not completed should be assumed to be no longer available. This would include any other opportunity that was underway but not complete. If there is one we have missed here, please email plot@profountdecisions.co.uk to let us know, and we will add it to this Wind of Fortune. Black Sails and Brokers. The merchants of Axos have responded poorly to both the words of the Loyalty Assembly and the events involving the Tamazi. Dissatisfied Aksu traders are avoiding the Black Sails Quay, resulting in reduced production. The current Quaymaster is Abel the Taller. Last season, a number of Aksu traders and ship captains raised a petition with the Empire regarding the Quaymaster of the Black Sails and the Black Sails Quay. They were unhappy that the title was appointed by the Loyalty Assembly, and asked if it would be possible to amend the title to be appointed by the secular Auction of the Seats. These Aksu expressed their belief that the priests of the Imperial Synod are agents of the hated Creator, even if they are not themselves aware of it. They would much prefer to see a position responsible for dealing with the Black Sails Quay appointed by the merchants of the Empire. The Loyalty Assembly upheld a statement of principle by Abel the Taller, refuting the claim that Imperial priests were in any way agents of the disinterested Creator. Once they are made aware of this statement, the dissatisfied merchants appear intent on pursuing their grievance by diplomatic channels, until, that is, news reaches them of the business with the Tamazi. Some of the ship captains and traders see this as another example of the Empire interfering in their business, and the result is a quick decline in the number of ships prepared to visit Necropolis, even to acquire the valuable Liao. Fortunately, the Synod has encouraged Imperial priests to sell their Liao, and those merchants are easily able to make contact with the secular traders in the League and the Brass Coast, who can serve as middlemen to provide them with the Liao they desire. As a consequence, the Quaymaster will lose access to the top two ranks of both their Liao trading opportunities, due to fewer traders being prepared to deal with them, and the amount of Liao required to secure each rank of their basic ministry will increase by about a fifth, representing the fact that they are being offered less favourable deals. While the Black Sails Quay is experiencing some problems and the anger of the Aksu is impacting trade between the two nations, there is at least a little good news. The Kikloto Krizu, the alliance of traders that deal with the Eastern broker, appear entirely unconcerned about the business with the Tamazi. A representative summed it up in coolly pragmatic terms. We didn't care about the orcs when they were in Axos, we certainly don't care about them now they have gone. Rumour from Axos suggests the Kikloto Krisu are very interested in exploiting the unhappiness of the merchants dealing with the Black Sails Quaymaster to move into the Liao trade, but it's unclear what form that interest will take. Commonwealth. The Commonwealth are signatories of the Liberty Pact. They have placed sanctions on trade with slaving nations. The magicians of the Commonwealth have access to imperial law. The current ambassador to the Commonwealth is Lucia Sangueno de Tessato of the League. Relations with the Commonwealth remain excellent, granting benefits to imperial fleets visiting either of the nation's larger port city. The situation in Lantir continues to escalate, but Lantir is very far away. Though armies have not yet gotten involved, there are a number of small forces, similar to the military units seen in the Empire, operating in the landlocked country. It is confidently expected that the Commonwealth and Yarm will be openly at war in the unfortunate Buffer Kingdom before the end of the year. Zaubera Things. The Senate has given permission for the Lyceum Schloss to be built on the Isle of Lyceum. The Commonwealth are offering rituals to the Empire. The Conclave will determine who gets them. Closer to home, the Imperial Senate has given permission for the Lyceum Schloss to be built on the Lyceum in Madruga. Within weeks of the winter solstice, a small fleet of Commonwealth vessels laden down with white granite, weirwood and workers arrived in Siroc, and with the assistance of a small escort from the Lyceum itself, set to work building a fortified manor house, a small castle really, on the eastern coast of the island. The first scholars and students are expected to take up residence shortly after the spring equinox, including a professor from the prestigious University of Volkovar. The Senate motion that permitted the building of the Schloss also meant seeding the structure, which has raised a few eyebrows amongst some of the more conservative magicians at the Lyceum. However, the assistance of the Commonwealth magicians will mean that the ability of the Lyceum to codify magical rituals that enchant armies, and in theory navies, has been improved. So most people pay their hand-wringing little heed. Furthermore, the Imperial Conclave has accepted the Commonwealth offer to share some of their own rituals with Imperial magicians. The details are still being worked out. The body of law used by the Zaubera works a little differently to Imperial law, it seems. After a great deal of discussion, the magical masters of the University at Volkovar extend the following offer to the Empire. They will provide 4 ritual texts to the Conclave, specifically to the Grand Masters of the Orders. All they want to know is which Grand Masters they should provide these ritual texts to. The Conclave can use a declaration of endowment to decide which orders will receive the rituals. The professors of Volkovar will then coordinate with the various Commonwealth institutions to arrange rituals appropriate to the orders in question to be delivered to those Grand Masters. Given the nature of this bequest, a single declaration of endowment can be used to assign any or all of these 4 ritual gifts to any number of orders. The Empire does not have a great deal of insight into Commonwealth magic. The civil service believe that while their magicians are masters of battlefield magic, especially of the realms of summer, autumn, and spring, they still possess a reasonable breadth of ritual knowledge that covers a number of topics. As such, any of the orders would make a suitable beneficiary for their offer. Farad'n. The Empire has instituted sanctions against the Farad'n. The Farad'n have not yet applied their own sanctions. The bounty placed on the lives of Livia of the Spire of Celestial Cascade, Lord Colwyn de Rondel, and Astrid Fjellrevening Rezia de Tessato by Farad'n families remains. The current ambassador to Farad'n is Erasmo de Tessato of the League. Relations between the Empire and the Farad'n have taken a turn for the worse. Discussions between the ambassador and their counterpart regarding the Liberty Pact and their nation abandoning the practice of slavery have stalled for now. Farad'n traders continue to come to the Empire, but their attitude remains distinctly cool. Smuggler's Glass. Imperial magistrates are investigating several groups of smugglers operating across the western border of the Brass Coast. There is an opportunity to assist the investigation by rescuing a missing magistrate. Also, during the winter solstice, the Imperial Senate made funds available to the magistrates to investigate reports of smuggling across the eastern borders of the Brass Coast. They intend to put a stop to the criminal alliance of the freeborn and Farad'n merchants flouting the sanctions imposed upon the Western nation. Response has been a little mixed. While many welcome the investigation, there are still those who believe any imposition of tariffs on trade is fundamentally unvirtuous, and that resisting by whatever means is the truly courageous and prosperous thing to do. Crucially, the Brass Coast National Assembly chose to remain silent on the matter, neither denouncing the smugglers nor endorsing their behaviour. As such, the magistrate's investigation has been slow-going, and has been made even more tricky by the presence of the Lassambrian Jotun in Karjaman. The magistrates do report that the Faradan merchants they have spoken to, including those travelling to and from the Moonwater Hall enclave in Upwold, are at best uncooperative and at worst downright obstructionist. This doesn't necessarily imply any particular level of guilt. The Faradan merchants seem broadly to be in agreement with the freeborn who believe it is not the business of the government to take money from hard-working traders, but it is very frustrating. You can find details of an opportunity to use the Sentinel Gate to help with the smuggling investigations in Kalabai Campo, Iron Confederacy. The Empire has placed sanctions on merchants from the Iron Confederacy. The Surani have responded with an embargo on imperial goods. The current ambassador to the Iron Confederacy is Lord Colwyn de Rondel. The port of Robeck remains closed to imperial ships. In the wake of the executions earlier in the year, very few imperial citizens are prepared to risk visiting the Confederacy. Imperial sanctions still permit Surani merchants to come north, but very few consider it worth their time, especially now that Feroz is in the hands of the Grendel rather than part of the Brass Coast. Dumon and Arav. A purge of the Hand of Dumon is underway in Surani lands. The Senate could condemn the Hand of Dumon and address Surani fears that the Empire is supporting them. A little news does make its way out of the southern nation, however. According to those few Surani traders visiting Segura, there has been a frightening increase in activity by the heinous Hand of Dumon, a band of hateful wizards of the worst kind who consort with the evil god Dumon. Every trader knows a story of someone being cursed or murdered or having their children kidnapped. In response, the priesthood Davarav, the silent judge, have declared the Surani equivalent of an inquisition against anyone even suspected of sheltering the degenerate magic wielders. With the priests on the warpath, and not inclined to take any chances that a servitor of Dumon might escape their wrath, it seems inevitable that any number of innocent magicians will end up being caught in their purge. Worse, while nobody comes out and says it aloud, there is apparently quite a bit of suspicion that the Empire is actively supporting the Hand of Dumon. The fact that many imperial citizens are themselves degenerate lovers of Dumon, at least in the eyes of the average Surani citizen, means that many consider this a practical certainty. A small number of people, primarily freeborn and a scattering of League citizens, have cautiously put forward the idea that the Imperial Senate could improve relations with the Iron Confederacy if they were to formally condemn the Hand of Dumon, recognize them as a criminal organization, much as they did with the Vieg, and make supporting them a crime. It wouldn't be a universal heal-all, and it wouldn't make everything better overnight, but it would be a start. While the average Surani would be unaware of it, the rulers of the Iron Confederacy would, and it would go some way to help countering their suspicions that the Empire is trying to destabilize their nation using the Hand of Dumon. Jotun, Brega's Land. A delegation from Brega's Land is visiting Anvil this summit. The delegation expects to arrive at 1800 on Friday and want to speak to all Bregas. Legally, the Imperial Consul is responsible for dealing with any ambassadors from a nation with which the Empire does not have an embassy. The Jotun have not made any formal approach to the Empire since the winter solstice, at least not technically. Last year, the Empire learned of a woman calling herself Matilda Fisher, a human ally of the Jotun who wishes to establish some kind of independent state in Brega's Land of all places. During the winter solstice, the heroes of Anvil ventured through the Sentinel Gate to Brega's Land and beat off the Yagara and their Jotun allies at Myasend. Whilst Matilda herself remains at Fisher's Rock, she has apparently sent a delegation to speak with the leaders of the Bregas at Anvil. It's not clear if she has support of the Jotun in doing this. Technically, this delegation could be seen as representing the Jotun Orcs. In theory, it could be seen as an envoy from an independent nation. Either way, the Imperial Consul is the one who has authority to deal with them, and any treaty brought before the Imperial Senate would need to be presented by them. The delegation, however, wish to speak first and foremost with marchers, and especially to the Bregas. The current Imperial Consul is themselves an Orc, which might give them some advantage in negotiating with a group of people who consider themselves to be Jotun. but it is up to the Imperial Council how they wish to proceed. Regardless of exactly who they represent, magistrates would like to remind citizens that the delegation is protected as foreigners under the law. Yarmish Ultimatum. The House of Princes have issued an ultimatum to the Empire. The current ambassador to the Principalities of Yarm is Gellert Ashbourne of Navarre. Relations with the Principalities of Yarm have deteriorated even further, hard as that may be to believe. Last season, the House of Princes implemented an embargo on imperial goods. This season has seen a formal public statement from Lord Magister Anton Thresher of the Hidden Hook, who serves as the Empire's main point of contact with the Principalities. In the absence of any correspondence from the Imperial Ambassador to the Principalities of Yarm, the Principalities must assume that the Empire is now their enemy. The Imperial Senate has 3 months, until the start of the summer solstice, to reassure the Principalities they do not intend to participate in any unlawful war against the Principalities or their neighbours. If that reassurance is not forthcoming, then the House of Princes will have no choice but to sever all ties with the Empire and make it a criminal matter if any citizen of their nation continues to do so. Should the Principalities take this step, it will certainly shut down the weirwood passing through the palace docks. There will be no more Yarmish visitors seeking the support of the ambassador or the imperial consul. Both titles will lose access to their ministry. The ability to purchase white seed will no longer be available, meaning it will no longer be possible to gain additional mana from a mana site. The additional mana available to Tosato mana exchange would be lost. The ports of Kavor and Vezak would remain closed. The lodge in Tosato would be abandoned, and imperial citizens visiting the Principalities of Yarm would face arrest. Trisha ends by declaring that the Principalities will also ensure that their allies, both mortal and otherwise, know that the Empire is their enemy, and will urge them to take whatever steps they can to prevent imperial malice from harming their people. Sarkovan Delves. The Sarkovan Delves continues to enjoy free trade with the Empire. The current ambassador to the Sarkovan Delves is Thanmir Hrafnar of Wintermark. Relations between the Empire and the Sarkovan Delves remain friendly. During the autumn equinox, the Imperial Senate ratified a treaty that has further cemented goodwill between the two nations on either side of the Sea of Teeth. The new Sarkovan enclave in Sarvos is doing very well by all accounts, and during the winter solstice the Imperial Senate gave instructions to construct a Temple of the Way in the city of Sarkovan. Work is expected to be completed just before the summer solstice 384. Thule. The Thule have taken control of Mir Chernia in Mir Karova and Webwood in Ossium. An opportunity to meet with some of the Thule is available at 22:30 on Saturday evening via the Hall of Worlds. The current ambassador to Otkodov is Yevgeny Katsev of Varushka. The Empire remains at peace with the Orcs of Otkodov. 3 Thule armies fought as allies alongside Imperial armies in Semasuak. At the same time, Thule armies have moved into Mirakova and Ossium to reclaim regions ceded to them as part of the treaty that secured their aid. The Thule have queried one aspect of that treaty. They believe that they agreed that the Thule armies present in Samasuak would always be outnumbered by Imperial armies. Rak, who speaks for the Dragons Undivided, has made it clear that the Thule still intend to abide by the treaty as it currently stands, but that if the armies were to become unbalanced, then that would be a matter for ambassadors to negotiate. Such a negotiation may be possible during the coming summit. A messenger from Rak has informed the Herald of the Council that there is an opportunity to meet with the representatives of the Dragons to discuss the ongoing war in Samasuak. Rather than attend Anvil, however, especially given how busy the generals of the Thule armies are, they propose a meeting in Lashona's Caucus Forum. A herald of the Whistler in the Wind will collect the ambassador and up to 3 others from the Hall of Worlds at 10:30 on Saturday evening, and convey them to the Caucus Forum for a discussion, returning them the same way. Trade Summary. Rather than spread this information around the various foreign nations, we have collected it here for ease of reference. Asavean Archipelago. With sanctions imposed by both the Empire and the Asavean Plenum, any fleet captain trading with Nemoria receives a -2 rank penalty on their production. Axos. Due to backlash from recent events and the dreadful docks at Izik, Imperial fleets suffer major penalties to trade with Axos. A fleet captain trading with the Towers of Cantor suffers a -3 rank penalty, while trading with the Chambers of Issyk suffers an incredible -5 rank penalty. The Commonwealth. Imperial fleet captains remain welcome in Commonwealth ports. Fleets trading with Leerdam receive an additional dram of blade root, while fleets trading with Volkovar receive an additional vial of artisan's oil on top of their normal production. Grendel. With sanctions imposed by both the Senate and the Council of Salt Lords, any fleet captain trading with Oran receives a -2 penalty to their production. Iron Confederacy. The port of Robeck remains closed to Imperial fleets. Principalities of Jarm. The ports of Cavor and Vezak remain closed to Imperial fleets. Sarkovan Delves. Imperial captains continue to be welcome in the Delves. Fleets trading with the great port city of Sarkovan receive an additional dose of marrowwort and an additional dose of Imperial roseweald on top of their normal production. Sumar Republic. Imperial captains are free to trade with the Sumar Republic. Fleets visiting Zemme receive standard production. Conjunction. Save Caesar's barn. An imperial magistrate involved in investigating smuggling has fallen into the hands of barbarian orcs. There is a conjunction of the Sentinel Gate that may allow a stealth mission to rescue them. Success will advance the imperial investigation into smuggling operations. A team of militia will be put together to attempt the rescue. Wintermark Magistrate Caesar's barn is one of those investigating the smuggling ring in Segura. As it became evident the Lasombrian Jotun were retreating back into Rhinos, Caesar's barn struck out with a small group of militia to investigate Kabali Campo, close to the end of the Gloaming Road. As a terminus of an important, legitimate trade route, the Campo presented an opportunity to seek out informants and follow leads. After all, there are few who dislike smugglers more than merchants who are actually paying the tariffs imposed upon them. Word was last received from the magistrate a week before the spring equinox. Caesar reported that they had taken custody of a certain freeborn individual known to trade across the western plains and always able to secure iridescent gloaming at an excellent price. Unfortunately, the magistrate and their prisoner did not make a planned rendezvous outside Anduz. A team of scouts from the Blackthorns brought grim news. There were signs of a fight not far from the Campo, with several dead militia members interred in shallow graves. It appears that the magistrate and quite likely their prisoner have fallen into enemy hands. A conjunction of the Sentinel Gate was identified shortly afterwards, leading to a location near the Kabbalai Campo. Chief Magistrate Stanislav Markovich has confirmed that there will be an expedition organized to try and rescue the Wintermark Magistrate and return them to Anvil, along with the alleged smuggler, if they still survive. It is not entirely clear if the magistrate has fallen into the hands of barbarian orcs or fallen afoul of freeborn or Faradan smugglers. Karkovich has denied requests from other imperial magistrates to join the rescue of their colleague, instead expecting this operation to be dealt with by members of the militia. He is especially interested in speaking with any freeborn militia, as this operation will be taking place in their backyard, so to speak. The Chief Magistrate further notes that there would be no legal complications arising from an attack that saw the deaths of any barbarian orcs, but should the captors prove to be foreigners or imperial citizens, then whenever possible their deaths must be avoided. Success and failure. Successfully rescuing Caesar Barn or their evidence will provide valuable leads to the magistrates. The magistrates and imperial scouts will need to analyze the information, but the hope is that it will lead to an opportunity at the summer solstice to shut down at least one, if not more, of the smuggling operations. Failure to rescue the magistrate or return with their evidence will mean that this opportunity to stop the smugglers will be lost, and any progress against the smugglers will be lost.